It was a Tuesday afternoon in early November. I was standing in the middle of a gutted kitchen that smelled like 50 years of old cooking grease and wet drywall. My feet were covered in a fine layer of white dust. The general contractor I hired had just finished explaining that the load-bearing wall I wanted to remove was actually hiding extensive water damage and completely fried electrical wiring. He handed me an updated estimate on a yellow clipboard. The number sitting at the bottom of the page was an extra $35,000. What I did not know at the time was that this single sheet of paper was going to wipe out 5 years of my savings and turn my dream of homeownership into a mathematical nightmare. My name is Mark, and I spend way too much time obsessing over the hidden math of real estate and the actual cost of our homeownership dreams. If you are someone who looks at property apps every night dreaming of buying a cheap house to fix up, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out, because today, I am not talking about how to tile a backsplash or flip a property for quick cash. I want to talk about the invisible financial sinkhole of buying a fixer-upper and why the sweat equity dream is mathematically designed to keep you broke. And I know it because I have been exactly where you are standing right now. I was 32 years old. I was earning $85,000 a year as a marketing manager. I had saved up enough for a down payment, but the housing market in my city had exploded. Move-in ready homes were selling for $500,000. I could not afford that. So I did what everyone told me was the smart financial move. I looked for the ugliest house in the best neighborhood I could afford. I found a 3-bedroom ranch from the 1970s for $340,000. It was ugly. The carpets were olive green. The kitchen cabinets were rotting, but I looked at it and saw pure profit. I thought I was hacking the system. I thought I was buying sweat equity. I closed on the house in October. I planned to do the demolition myself on the weekends. I figured I would save $10,000 right out of the gate by just swinging a sledgehammer. I invited 2 friends over, bought some pizza, and we started tearing down the kitchen. It felt amazing. I felt like a real estate genius. Then the dust settled. The contractor came in to give me the quote for the actual rebuild. He pointed to the ceiling joists. He pointed to the black spots creeping up the wood inside the walls. He told me the wiring was a massive fire hazard. The plumbing was corroded steel pipes that were actively leaking into the crawl space. My initial renovation budget was $40,000. I thought that $40,000 would turn my $340,000 ugly house into a $500,000 masterpiece. I thought I was going to instantly create $120,000 of wealth out of thin air. Instead, I was staring at a piece of yellow paper that said $75,000 just to make the house safe to live in. Not pretty, just safe. No quartz countertops. No luxury flooring. Just wiring that would not burn the house down and pipes that would not flood the basement. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. I only had $45,000 left in my entire bank account. I was $30,000 short, and my house currently had no kitchen, no functioning bathroom, and a massive hole in the living room wall. I used to believe that buying a finished house was for lazy people. I actually judged my friends who bought new construction. I told myself they were throwing their money away on a premium markup. I was the smart one. I was the one willing to get my hands dirty. I had my spreadsheets perfectly organized. Purchase price in column A, renovation budget in column B, projected after repair value in column C. It all looks so simple on a computer screen. But a spreadsheet does not account for black mold. A spreadsheet does not account for city permitting delays. And a spreadsheet definitely does not prepare you for the psychological weight of living in a construction zone while your bank account drains to zero. I stood in that kitchen and realized I had made a terrible mistake. But the $35,000 surprise bill was only the first layer of the disaster. The real financial damage was hiding somewhere else entirely, and it was about to cost me a lot more than just the price of a new electrical panel. I did not have a name for it back then. I just thought I was having a run of incredibly bad luck. But months later, when I finally went looking for answers, I found out it was called the Project House Illusion. It was 2 in the morning. I was sitting on a mattress on the floor of my half-finished bedroom. I was panicking over a plumbing quote and scrolling through real estate forums on my phone. That was when I came across a 2022 study by House on home renovation trends. I read the numbers on the glowing screen and felt sick to my stomach. I used to think that a renovation budget was a firm mathematical limit. If I set aside $40,000, I believed I would spend exactly $40,000. Then I found the data showing that nearly half of all homeowners who take on a renovation end up blowing past their initial budget. But it was the average overrun that completely broke my spirit. The study showed that the average budget overrun was 20%. I read that twice. People who were meticulously planning their dream homes were missing the mark by a massive margin, and that was just the average for normal updates. For older homes, the numbers were significantly worse. This is the first layer of the trap. The part most people kind of know but arrogantly think they can beat. We buy cheap houses because we think our physical labor will magically cover the gap between the purchase price and the final value. I bought my house for $340,000. A beautiful move-in-ready house, 3 streets over, had just sold for $420,000. I thought that $80,000 gap was simply waiting for me to claim it. I told my friends all I had to do was paint some walls, install some cheap cabinets, and collect my free equity. But the project house illusion tricks you by hiding the structural reality behind cosmetic flaws. When I walked through the open house, I only saw the ugly olive green carpets. I did not see the sagging floor joists underneath them. I saw outdated yellow bathroom tile. I did not see the galvanized steel pipes that had been slowly rusting from the inside out since 1974. When you finally pull up that ugly carpet to lay down your new flooring, you find asbestos tiles underneath. Removing those tiles legally and safely costs $5,000. Suddenly, your weekend cosmetic update becomes a hazardous material situation. Your budget is bleeding before you even buy a single piece of new material. I was learning this lesson the hard way. I was writing massive checks for things that added absolutely zero visual value to my home. Nobody walks into a house and compliments the electrical panel. Nobody praises the invisible structural integrity of a reinforced load-bearing beam. But those invisible fixes were draining every dollar I had saved for the past 5 years. I thought the bleeding would stop once I secured the structure. I thought if I just paid the $35,000, I could get back on track. But the money evaporating in front of me was only a fraction of what I was actually losing. Because while my savings account was dropping to zero, the calendar was quietly stealing from me in a way I had never even calculated. At first, I only saw this part, and I thought I understood it. Let me tell you about the spreadsheet I built before I closed on the house. I was so proud of that spreadsheet. I color-coded the columns. I used exact formulas. I had column A for the purchase price of my ugly house, $340,000. I had column B for my renovation budget, $40,000. Then I had column C for the final value of the house once I was done, $420,000. That was what the beautiful move-in-ready house down the street had just sold for. The math seemed flawless. $340,000 plus $40,000 equals $380,000. Subtract that from $420,000. That left $40,000. I looked at that $40,000 difference and smiled. I thought I was creating $40,000 of pure wealth just by making a few phone calls and painting some walls. I thought I was a real estate investor. But my spreadsheet was a work of fiction. It was based on the prices I saw printed on the tags at the big box home improvement store. I walked down the aisles on a Saturday afternoon. I looked at a nice bathroom vanity, $800. I looked at the boxes of luxury vinyl plank flooring, $2 a square foot. I multiplied the square footage of my house by $2, $3,000 total for the floors. I wrote it all down. I thought I had cracked the code. What I actually did was calculate the absolute cheapest cost of raw materials in a vacuum. I completely ignored the reality of how a house actually gets put together. I bought the vanity for $800, but I did not know how to install the plumbing. So I hired a plumber. He charged $150 an hour. It took him 4 hours to fix the weird pipe alignment the previous owner left behind. Then he charged a $200 service fee. My $800 vanity suddenly cost $1,600. I bought the flooring for $3,000. But when I ripped up the old carpet, the wooden subfloor was warped. You cannot lay rigid planks over a wavy floor. It will crack. I had to hire a crew to come in and pour a self-leveling concrete compound over the entire first floor. That cost $4,500. Before a single piece of new flooring was laid down, I was already over budget. My $40,000 safety net was vanishing into thin air, and I had not even bought the kitchen cabinets yet. This is the first layer of the project house illusion. We calculate the cost of the finished product. We never calculate the cost of the preparation. We see the shiny new tile in the magazine. We do not see the cost of the waterproof membrane, the cement board, the thin-set mortar, and the grout. We definitely do not see the cost of the skilled labor required to make sure that tile does not leak into the kitchen downstairs. I sat in my dusty living room and crossed out the numbers on my beautiful spreadsheet. My fake $40,000 profit was gone. My entire budget was blown on fixing subfloors and pipes, but I told myself I could just eat rice and beans for a few months to cover the difference. I thought the worst was over. I was so wrong, because the cost of the materials and the labor was just the obvious trap. There was a silent killer waiting for me, and it had absolutely nothing to do with hammers, nails, or contractors. But when I dug deeper, I found something that most people never notice. I thought my bad luck with the subfloor and the plumbing was a freak accident. I thought I was the only person who had failed at basic renovation math. Then I found the real numbers on what actually happens when normal people try to fix up a house they live in. I used to believe that a 20% contingency fund was just a suggestion for nervous people. I thought if you planned perfectly, you would never need it. Then I found a 2021 survey from Home Advisor looking at millions of home improvement projects across the country. The data showed that a mid-range kitchen remodel does not cost the $15,000 you see on television shows. The national average was closer to $25,000 to $35,000, and a bathroom remodel was not a weekend project for $3,000. It was averaging over $10,000 per bathroom. I read those numbers and felt a cold knot in my stomach, because my spreadsheet was based on the television numbers, not the real-world numbers. Let me walk you through the math of my own kitchen disaster. I had budgeted $12,000 for the entire room. I thought that was generous. I ordered stock cabinets for $5,000. I bought standard appliances on sale for $3,000. I had $4,000 left for countertops, lighting, a sink, and the labor. Then the contractor opened the wall to move the stove over by 2 feet. You cannot just move a stove. You have to move the 220-volt electrical line, you have to move the gas line, you have to vent the new microwave hood to the outside. My $4,000 buffer vanished in 3 days of structural rework. The electrician charged $1,200 just to pull the new heavy-duty wire from the basement to the kitchen. The plumber charged $900 to reroute the gas pipes safely. The city inspector came out and said the old electrical panel could not handle the new appliances. That was a mandatory $3,500 upgrade. I was writing checks for things I could not even see once the drywall went up. I ended up spending $22,000 on a kitchen I had budgeted $12,000 for. That is an overrun of nearly 100%. My master bathroom was exactly the same story. I budgeted $4,000. I found a cracked shower pan under the old fiberglass tub. Water had been slowly rotting the floor joists for a decade. Rebuilding the floor and waterproofing the shower correctly cost $6,000 before a single piece of decorative tile went on the wall. The total bathroom cost hit $9,500. Between just the kitchen and one bathroom, my $40,000 renovation budget was completely gone. I had $31,500 sunk into just 2 rooms. I still had to paint the whole house, replace the water heater, and fix the rotting back deck. The 20% average overrun I read about in that study was actually a best-case scenario. For an amateur like me, the overrun was pushing 80%. The fake $40,000 of equity I thought I was building had completely evaporated. In fact, I was mathematically underwater. I had poured so much cash into the house that if I sold it for the new upgraded price of $420,000, I would actually lose money after paying the real estate agent fees and the closing costs. I was trapped. I was living on a diet of cheap fast food because I had no working stove. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, expecting the contractor to ask for another check. But the worst part was not the receipts piling up on my makeshift plywood dining table. The worst part was something completely invisible. It was a phantom cost I was paying every single day without even realizing it. And it was draining my bank account faster than any plumbing repair ever could. And this is the part that took me years to figure out. The part nobody tells you when they sell you on the dream of sweat equity. When you watch a home renovation show, the demolition takes 5 minutes of screen time. The rebuild takes 10 minutes. The big reveal happens right before the commercial break. But in the real world, time is not free. Time is incredibly expensive. I bought my ugly house in October. My apartment lease was supposed to end in December. I gave myself 2 full months to make the new house livable. But because of the black mold, the fried electrical panel, and the city permitting delays, the house became a toxic construction zone for 6 straight months. I could not sleep there. I could not cook there. There was no toilet. I had to go to my landlord and beg for a month-to-month extension on my apartment lease. My rent was $1,800 a month. My new mortgage, including property taxes and homeowner insurance, was $2,000 a month. Every single month, on the first day of the month, I would sit at my small apartment kitchen table. I would open my banking app. I would watch my checking account balance drop by $3,800 in a single click just to keep a roof over my head. I was paying for 2 places to live, but I was only sleeping in one. The renovation dragged on for 4 extra months beyond my original timeline. 4 months of paying double the housing costs. Let us do the math on that. 4 times $3,800 is $15,200. That is $15,200 in pure, unrecoverable carrying costs. It did not buy me a nicer sink. It did not upgrade my flooring. It was dead money. I was literally paying $15,200 just for the privilege of waiting for contractors to show up. When you add that carrying cost to my blown renovation budget, my financial situation was completely unraveling, but even that number does not capture the true devastation of the project house illusion. Because when you blow cash on carrying costs and massive budget overruns, you are not just losing the money today. You are losing what that money could have become. Let me explain the opportunity cost. If I had not bought the fixer-upper, I would not have burned that $15,200 on double rent and mortgage payments. I would not have burned the extra $20,000 on structural surprises and forced electrical upgrades. That is roughly $35,000 of extra cash I had to drain from my investment accounts just to survive the project. What if I had left that $35,000 invested in a simple index fund? Let us assume a historical average return of 8% per year. I was 32 years old at the time. If I never added another penny to it, that $35,000 would compound over the next 30 years. By the time I hit age 62, that money would have grown to roughly $352,000. I sat on the floor of my apartment, staring at the calculator app on my phone, and felt all the air leave my lungs. My stupid attempt to save money by doing the work myself was not just costing me my weekends. It was costing my future self $352,000 in retirement wealth. I was literally robbing my 62-year-old self to pay for a temporary kitchen island today. That was the heaviest moment of my entire life. I was trapped in a financial black hole of my own making, and I still had not compared this disaster to the path I originally mocked. I used to make fun of the people who bought the expensive, finished houses. I called them lazy. But let us look at the actual math of what would have happened if I had just bought the $420,000 move-in ready house down the street. Let us put my path and the lazy path side by side. Path 1 is what I actually did. I bought my ugly house for $340,000. My 20% down payment was $68,000. I spent $75,000 on the mandatory structural repairs and the blown budget. I burned $15,200 on double housing costs while I waited for the work to be done. My total cash out of pocket in the first 6 months was $158,200. And I spent every single weekend covered in drywall dust, fighting with city inspectors, and eating cold takeout. Now let us look at path 2. The lazy path. The beautiful move-in ready house was $420,000. A 20% down payment on that house is $84,000. Let us add $12,000 for closing costs. Total cash out of pocket to move in on day 1 is $96,000. I would have unlocked the front door. I would have walked into a perfect kitchen with working appliances. I would have slept in a clean, quiet bedroom that very first night. Let us look at the gap between those two numbers. My chaotic path cost me $158,200 in cash. The lazy path would have cost me $96,000 in cash. That is a massive difference of $62,200. By trying to save money on a cheaper fixer-upper, I actually drained $62,200 more from my bank account up front than if I had just bought the expensive house. But the math gets so much worse over time. Let us project this out over 10, 20, and 30 years. If I took that lazy path, I would have kept that $62,200 safely sitting in my index funds. Assuming a historical 8% average annual return, let us see what the compound interest does to that gap. After 10 years, that $62,200 grows to roughly $134,000. After 20 years, it compounds into $289,000. After 30 years, it explodes to $626,000. I read those numbers out loud to myself in my empty living room. $626,000. The move-in ready house was not more expensive. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars cheaper over a lifetime. It just required a slightly higher mortgage payment each month. But my lower mortgage payment was a complete illusion. It was entirely wiped out by the massive upfront cash I burned trying to build sweat equity. I sat there looking at these two paths. The lazy path made me $626,000 richer by the time I retired. The hard-working path made me broke, stressed, and living in a perpetual construction zone. The lifetime math was absolutely undeniable. It was right there in front of my face. But knowing the math did not immediately stop me from making things worse. Because even with the numbers staring at me, I kept pulling out my credit card. I was fighting something much stronger than a spreadsheet. And it is the exact same psychological trap that the home improvement industry relies on to keep you spending. I had the lifetime math right in front of me. I knew about my $626,000 mistake. But the next morning, I woke up and drove straight back to the big box home improvement store. I grabbed a giant flatbed cart and loaded it up with more materials. Why was I still spending money I did not have on a house that was ruining my life? That was when I finally understood why the project house illusion is so incredibly hard to escape. It is not just a math problem. It is a psychological trap. I was drowning in a textbook case of the sunk cost fallacy. I had already poured $75,000 into this house. I had spent 6 months of my life breathing in fine white dust and sleeping on a mattress on the floor. My brain literally could not accept that this was a bad investment. If I stopped spending, I would have to admit defeat. I would have to admit that the lazy path was actually the smart path. So I kept throwing good money after bad. I convinced myself that the very next purchase would be the one to finally turn things around. The entire home improvement industry is perfectly designed to exploit this exact emotional state. Every time I felt exhausted, I would turn on the television. I would watch those home renovation networks while eating my takeout food. You know the exact shows I am talking about. A smiling couple buys a disaster of a house. They hit a few minor snags right before the commercial break. But after 45 minutes of television time, they are standing in a perfect modern kitchen crying happy tears. The celebrity host tells them they just created $100,000 in instant equity. I was sitting on a folding chair in an empty room, watching these shows and getting completely manipulated. They never show the 6 months of fighting with your partner over a maxed-out credit card. They never show the silent panic attacks when the city plumbing inspector fails your permit for the 3rd time. They sell you the emotional payoff. They make you believe that your own grand reveal moment is just one more purchase away. Let me tell you exactly how they played me. It was a rainy Sunday afternoon. I went to the hardware store because I needed a $20 box of drywall screws. That was the only thing on my list. Just $20. But as I walked toward the register, I passed the decorative lighting aisle. I saw a beautiful brushed brass dining room chandelier on display. It cost $450. I did not even have a dining room table yet. My dining room was currently functioning as a storage unit for a massive pile of broken drywall and old pipes. But I looked at that chandelier and I felt a desperate physical need to see something pretty in my house. I wanted to buy the feeling of progress. I put the $450 light fixture in my cart. I swiped my credit card, adding to a balance that was charging me 18% interest. I justified the purchase by telling myself it would increase the final resale value of the home. I was lying to myself. I was emotionally exhausted, and the retail environment offered me a quick hit of dopamine disguised as a smart real estate investment. I brought it home and hung it from the ceiling. It illuminated the garbage on the floor perfectly. I realized then that my sweat equity was not making me rich. My sweat equity was just making me exhausted, irrational, and completely broke. Let me say out loud the objection that is forming in your head right now, because it used to form in mine every single time someone questioned my choices. I still clung to one final argument that I thought proved I was financially brilliant, and I understand exactly what you are thinking right now. I thought the same thing. You are thinking that the math only looks bad because I had to hire contractors for the plumbing and the electrical work. You are thinking that the real money is made in the pure sweat equity, the late nights painting the walls, the long weekends laying the luxury vinyl flooring yourself. If you just do the physical labor with your own two hands, you beat the system. I know this sounds unrealistic. I pushed back against this idea for years. I told my friends that every hour I spent swinging a hammer was an hour I was paying myself a contractor rate. I truly believed my labor was free, but here is what I spent years not understanding. Your time is never free. In fact, your time is the most expensive asset you are putting into that project house. Let us run the real numbers on my free labor. I was earning $85,000 a year at my marketing job. If you break that down based on a standard work week, my baseline value was roughly $41 an hour. Every single hour I spent watching internet tutorials on how to grout a shower, I was spending my own time. I actually sat down and tracked it, once I realized how bad my financial situation was getting. Over the course of 6 months, I spent roughly 500 hours working on that house. I worked every evening from 6 until 10. I worked every Saturday and Sunday from sunrise to sunset, 500 hours. If you multiply that by my $41 hourly rate, that is $20,500 of my time poured into the property. But I was not just losing the raw mathematical value of my time. I was actively stealing energy from the place that actually paid my bills. I would show up to my marketing job completely exhausted. My hands were covered in tiny cuts and paint stains. My lower back constantly ached from carrying heavy boxes of tile up the stairs. Because I was so tired, I stopped volunteering for new projects at work. I stopped pitching creative ideas in meetings. My brain was entirely consumed by drywall screws and city permits. At the end of that year, I missed out on an annual performance bonus that was usually around $8,000. My boss actually pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home because my performance had visibly slipped. That was the counterintuitive truth I finally had to swallow. My free labor cost me an $8,000 bonus at work, and it cost me $20,500 of my personal time. I was not a skilled tradesman. A real professional could have tiled that bathroom in 2 days. It took me 3 weeks of making mistakes, ripping the mistakes out, and buying new materials to try again. I was paying retail prices for materials to do amateur work that actively damaged my primary source of income. When I finally admitted that my sweat equity was actually a massive financial loss, my entire perspective shifted. I knew I had to stop the bleeding immediately, but I could not just walk away from a half-finished house. I had to figure out how to dig myself out of the hole. I sat in my car after that conversation with my boss. My hands were resting on the steering wheel. I finally admitted that my ego was destroying my financial future. I had to stop the bleeding immediately. The first thing I did was fire the general contractor. I walked into the house the next morning and told him to pack up his tools. I paid him the final invoice for the structural work that was already finished. That was an $8,000 check. But by firing him, I instantly canceled the remaining $22,000 of our original agreement. I realized I was paying a massive premium just for him to stand around and manage other people. I decided I would only hire individual plumbers or electricians for the exact tasks I could not legally do myself. The second step I took was radical triage. I stopped trying to build my dream home. I completely abandoned the spreadsheet that promised me $40,000 of instant equity. My new goal was simply to make the house legally livable so I could escape my apartment lease. I walked through the dusty rooms with a black marker and a roll of blue tape. I marked only the absolutely essential items. I drove to the hardware store and returned the $450 decorative chandelier. I stopped watching the home improvement television shows entirely. Instead of buying custom glass tile for the shower, I bought a basic white fiberglass surround for $350. I hired a local drywall worker for $2,000 to just finish the kitchen wall so I could hang the cabinets. I did not paint the guest bedrooms. I did not replace the baseboards in the hallway. I left the concrete subfloor exposed in the living room and threw a cheap rug over it. The third thing I changed was my living situation. By stripping the project down to bare survival, I made the house functional in exactly 21 days. It was not pretty. The kitchen had no backsplash. The floors were mismatched, but the toilet flushed, the stove turned on, and the roof did not leak. I packed my boxes, ended my apartment lease, and moved into the ugly house. That single decision stopped the most vicious hidden cost of the entire project. I immediately stopped paying $1,800 a month in rent. My monthly housing cost dropped back down to just my $2,000 mortgage payment. In the first 3 months of living in the unfinished house, I kept $5,400 in my bank account that would have otherwise gone to my landlord. I used that exact money to slowly buy the remaining materials in cash. No more credit cards, no more 18% interest rates on lighting fixtures. The panic attacks finally stopped. I could sleep through the night again. I had survived the most dangerous part of the trap. But I still had to figure out how to avoid this mistake for the rest of my life. Because surviving a financial disaster is not the same thing as actually building wealth. I needed a permanent mathematical rule to make sure I never fell for the sweat equity scam again. The fourth step I took was creating a strict mathematical rule for any future real estate decisions. I call it the true cost multiplier. I will never again look at a property and just subtract the purchase price from the projected final value. Now, I take the estimated renovation budget and multiply it by 1.5. That is a mandatory 50% buffer for hidden structural disasters. Then I calculate the exact number of hours the project will require me to manage it. I multiply those hours by my $41 hourly rate. I add the buffer and my labor costs together. If that final number is higher than the cost of simply buying a move-in-ready house, I walk away completely. I used this exact rule 3 years later when I finally sold that nightmare house and bought my next one. I found another ugly house that looked like a great deal. It was listed for $400,000. The pristine, move-in-ready house next door was listed for $500,000. The old me would have seen a $100,000 profit waiting to be claimed. But I ran my new formula. A $60,000 renovation times 1.5 became $90,000. Adding 400 hours of my time at $41 an hour was $16,400. The total real cost was $106,400. The cheap house was actually $6,400 more expensive than the perfect house next door. So I bought the perfect house. I paid the $500,000. I moved in on a Friday afternoon. I did not paint a single wall. I did not swing a single hammer. On Saturday morning, I woke up, drank my coffee, and read a book in a quiet, clean living room. I bought my weekends back, and because my energy was fully restored, I earned a $12,000 promotion at work that very same year. The fifth thing I did was automate my actual investments. Once I stopped bleeding cash into hardware stores, I had $500 of disposable income again every month. I set up an automatic transfer. That $500 went straight into an index fund on the first of every month. Over 30 years, at an 8% return, that simple automated habit creates almost $750,000. That is real wealth. You do not build wealth by turning your living room into a construction zone to save a few $1,000s on tile. You build wealth by protecting your time, protecting your energy, and letting compound interest do the heavy lifting. The project house illusion tricks you into believing that your physical suffering equals financial progress. But a house is just a place to live. It is not a part-time job you cannot quit. If this video helped you see your finances differently, I want you to hit that like button and subscribe. Every video I make is something I wish someone had told me years earlier. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.